Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, CesarRespino. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. It is your host, Cesar Espino, and you can find me at www.CesarRespino.com. And today I have a special guest. His name is Ash Hoey from Australia. Hey, Ash, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I'm glad to have you here, and I want to dive in and talk to you about everything that who's Ash, and then also about what you have going on right now. And my understanding, you are one of the co-founders of Stadio.Global, which is an ecosystem for sports. And so I definitely want to dive in more into that. Except, why don't you give us more about you and tell us more about who's Ash?
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, it's a very simple story. I'm an Australian entrepreneur. My background has come from ID verification and fraud prevention software. So I built and sold a company a couple of years ago, sold it to an ASX-listed business here in Australia, worked in that business for a while after acquisition, and have essentially now started looking at my new venture, which is to do with sports, blockchain, and everything to do with Web3. So my co-founder, Martin, who unfortunately can't make it today, he's got a very similar background, but we actually met through doing some business dealings together. His background was a police checking business, and mine was ID verification. And we actually sort of met through a deal we did, obviously working for a company. So yeah, we obviously had a good sort of background working together, but also found some common interests around sports, blockchain technology, and where we thought the industry was going. And so naturally we thought, what the hell, let's start a business together.
That is awesome. So I'm gonna take a little bit back because definitely I always find this very interesting to see how people they step out of a life or we're in this idea of and I know it's very similar in America to other places like in Australia, where it's like, hey, just be good in school, get a good education, go out and get the best job, and kind of go through that life story, right? And I find it very interesting that there's many people that decide to take that route of being an entrepreneur and taking it to a whole new different level. And then you have people that might feel like maybe that's not for me. Except part of the reason why I created the show is to be able to have people like you and showcase them in terms of you too can overcome anything you want. You too can do whatever you want if you want to get to that route. So I always find that very interesting. And so I want to learn more about you in terms of your upbringing. How was that for you? How was your life? How was your family? How was that for you?
Oh, asking the tough questions. I love
it.
So look, I'm very lucky to come from a privileged background. My father's worked in aviation. My mother's been a fantastic, sort of mum raising the kids. In my sort of later school years, I did boarding. So parents were living overseas. I boarded in Australia, but I found a lot of my time was being sort of sucked up in my sporting world. It also helped me stay out of trouble, I guess, being part of a sporting group, making sure you're doing things after school and not getting involved with the wrong crowd. But yeah, spent a lot of time, and a lot of my passion went into that. But having put all my eggs into probably that sporting basket, hoping to, like all young, athletes, I was doing basketball, hoping that I'd get drafted one day, like every young kid, not to be, unfortunately, due to injury. But, that's when I started seeing my first kind of, pivoting concept around, this isn't going to be a career. What do I do next? How am I going to earn a living, stand on my own 2 feet, and all those questions, going through adolescence and trying to figure out where your place is in the world. It was through that journey that really taught me a lot of, perseverance, how to overcome, some really tough obstacles. And I guess, trying to, land on your feet, I picked up a bit of hospitality work, then decided to get into marketing, went back to university, thought that I was going to get into the police force and realized that wasn't for me either. And during that journey, that was when I started to figure out, all right, well, actually, there's something that I'm being affected with in my own personal life, which was trying to find my first rental as a young student, trying to, go and find that first place and compete against people with, better rental resumes that you have, better, incomes. Mm-hmm. So how am I going to jump the queue? And that's like, the first questions that any entrepreneur would ask themselves is, what problem can I solve? And I guess that was my first, jumping into the whole, entrepreneurial spirit. And I started my first startup, which was in the real estate space. And then obviously going on that journey, I decided, there's some other opportunities and actually pivoted into what was my last business, ended up successfully selling that as an ID verification business. So there's a lot of detail in that, but I thought I'd give you the high level pitch. But really it comes down to just perseverance. And there were many days that I wish I could just throw the towel in and leave it all behind. But at the end of the day, you say to yourself, that's not who you are. And you want to keep pushing for, not just yourself, but the people that have believed in you and invested in you to date. And so that was always very important to me as well.
Yeah, you definitely said a lot of great things. And the first thing is that the perseverance and just keep going. And so where did that mindset come from? Where did you build that kind of mindset? Because again, switching back and forth, trying to find yourself between one job to another job to, like you said, there were times you wanted to kind of throw in the towel. Somewhere down the line, the idea or that mindset of, yeah, even if I have to throw in the towel a million times, I got to keep going, right? Where did that come from and how did that develop?
Look, I'll be brutally honest with you. And I think this is something that a lot of people will have to, figure out where that kind of inner, push comes from. Mm-hmm. And for me, if I'm being, again, as I said, brutally honest, it was the fact that I felt like I owed it to the people who have, believed in me, and them being some of my, closest relatives, being my mother and father. They were some of my earliest investors. And, waking up every day, even though things might have felt like the world was, crumbling around me, I didn't want to let them down. And sometimes the push you need doesn't come necessarily from your own selfish needs. It's to make sure that you're doing right by others. And for me, there was nothing more that, like for me, it was just a no-brainer, right? I wasn't going to let them down. So as crap as things might have been going on, because the life of a startup is not straightforward. It's definitely a roller coaster, ups and downs. And I'm sure everyone knows that. But it's definitely on those days that I felt I wanted to quit, knowing that I wanted to do this and I wasn't going to give up for them. That's what kept me going. So it might not be like that for everyone, but for me, it was a matter of, I guess, duty and just a responsibility to persevere.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you have to be able to go with somebody else believing in you, even if you don't believe in yourself, right? And sometimes that is what's gonna get you to the next level, right? Let's talk about obviously you went through all of that. You're able to finally figure out, what, I want to become an entrepreneur. Where did that come from too? Because again, the idea of having that corporate job, 9 to 5, security, right? In quote unquote security, in terms of getting that fist paycheck, is what a lot of people are attracted to, right? Except you found out throughout the journey that was not for you, and you needed to become an entrepreneur, which you did. You had a pretty good, successful business, the first one. You did real estate. Now you're doing this. How did that come about?
Yeah, look, it's hard to pinpoint exactly when or how it came about. I think it's a gradual, not a I don't want to say a decay, because I think it's a positive thing, right?
Yeah.
Looking to work for yourself and take that responsibility. Obviously, when you do go out for yourself, you carry all the responsibility, and it's not someone else's business. You're playing with someone else's money. But I think that there's been an entrepreneurial spirit in my family for quite a few generations at least. I know, as far as my grandparents, both on my grandparents' sides, they'd gone out and started their own businesses, and I think that that's just been a healthy kind of journey that most of the people in my family have gone on. And you definitely meet people along the way that inspire you, and I've definitely had mentors Definitely ones that stand out more than others. And one in particular has been instrumental in helping guide me. And you take on all the different good parts of people around you in just your social circles, professional circles. But at the end of the day, you've got to trust that sort of feeling you get around, I believe in something so strongly that you want to obviously take that next step. Because if you haven't got that, you're never going to jump off the ledge and see what's on the other side. So look, there's not, like I said, not one particular moment that I can pinpoint to say, all right, I'm going to, go out for business on my own, but it's a gradual thing. And as long as you validate yourself along the process and make sure that you're also getting other people that you trust to validate, that you're not just building something in an ivory tower and hoping, they will come. It's definitely something you need to work hard on and obviously put your feelers out to make sure you're getting the right feedback.
Yeah, definitely. And even with that, and I like the idea of making sure that you get that validation, and also you believe in what you're doing, right? I don't know if this was for you, as it has been to many entrepreneurs, the first couple of months, years, whatever, it's a challenging thing, right? And sometimes you might find yourself like, we're not making ends meet, or I'm not getting the results that I want. What do you tell those people that might be in those first stages, and you got to be able to say, you know what, you got to just keep going through, because if this is really what you believe and this is what you really want, it's not going to be all nice and beautiful at the beginning. Unfortunately, it's not for everybody, right?
No, absolutely. And I think that's actually a very important point, right? It's one thing to have perseverance, and yes, you've got to have conviction. But there's also a piece that a lot of people do tend to miss sometimes, which is this needed, right? And that's where, if I'm not solving a problem, what other kind of value add are you doing with whatever business that you're getting yourself involved with? Now, this is not to deter anyone from, exploring, ideas. If we didn't have innovation and taking wild leaps of faith, like, we wouldn't have some really great things that, are in our day-to-day lives today. However, I think that if you've been working on something for X amount of time, you're, starting to feel like you're hitting rock bottom. Even like I said myself, I had my first startup, which was the real estate concept. I worked on that for quite a while and, put a lot of resources and efforts into that. And when I talk about from my own personal journey, some of those days it felt really dark and how am I going to get out of this hole? There was some serious money on the line, and I owed that to not just, family, but friends and other investors. So, thinking about how am I going to, change the narrative? And that's where I pivoted, and I had to change what I was doing fundamentally to try a different approach, because I realized I have given this absolutely everything, going down this certain path. It's not working. What can I do now to sort of change or pivot? And I think that is a really important piece. And a good example, you might not know a name, a startup called Bourbon. But they started off with an application where you could tag people, share locations, and it was kind of a social, app for everything, like a very early Square and Facebook in a way. But the startup wasn't getting traction. There was millions of dollars that were being poured into it. And then they started to look at, all right, how can we pivot? And so they started reducing and taking features away. And then they slowly ended up with this aspect, noticing that the only function that was really being used, and was being used quite well, was just being able to take photos and tag people. Hence, Instagram was born. They pivoted into something else, and look at where that company then got to, because they got rid of the distraction and focused on what was working. So that's just another really good example of, you believe in something and you know that there's something great, but you've really got to hone in on getting the feedback, understanding where your value add and where your points are, and then focus on that so that you can then, continue the journey. But, it's not for everyone. Some people might say, all right, I've had a go, I'm going to sort of go down a different direction or close up shop. There's also there's no negative sort of feelings towards people that do that. It's not for everyone, right? And you've got to understand where your limits are. But, I'm young, I can still recover, and a lot of people can as well. But at the end of the day, it's a personal choice, and how far you push the envelope is completely independent and individual.
Yeah, I definitely love that, the idea of changing the narrative, or looking at things from a different perspective. I always tell people, if something's not working, you got to put on a different lens to see it from a different perspective and be able to pivot. And so I definitely love that. You brought this up, and I think it's actually pretty interesting to kind of mention that. Do you believe that there's a pro or a con against your age? You know, is it too early for me to start a journey? Am I too old to start? Or, you know, and I always hear that, right? And so what is your take on that, on the age factor?
Yeah, look, I say absolutely not. And I hope I didn't give that impression. It was more just an example, again, personal to
Right.
myself, you know, how
Yep.
I view that, which
Right.
is I know that if I was to fail at something, I've still got time to recover in my own personal, you know, sense.
Right.
And that's also because I know what my, you know, my savings are, my holdings. I know that I've got
Yeah.
time to build things up. That might not be the case for everyone, depending on how much is invested, how much you've got in your sort of war chest. But in terms of if it's an age thing, I say absolutely not. There's still set formulas and I guess processes that you need to work through around, am I solving a problem first and foremost? You know, is there a commercial model? Is it going to be able to be scaled? You know, how much capital am I going to need? You know, is the risk versus, you know, reward ratio? I think, you know, if you were, you know, in, I guess, your later sort of stages of life and you're thinking about opening up a, you know, an Italian restaurant in the middle of a, you know, Italian district, I would probably say, look, you know, there are some good, you know, cases out there to say that's probably not the best move, simply because, you know, you look at trying to open up business in a busy street even, you've got competition. You want to look to where there's no competition. And I'm a massive fan of Peter Thiel's, you know, sort of teachings in that 0 to 1 book. And I know it's a very sort of talked about, you know, book in the startup world, but, you know, he does make comment around, there's nothing wrong with opening up a restaurant, but if you're going to open up a restaurant in a busy street and you're going to have competition, right? Me personally, I don't want to go into that mindset where I'm going to have to be fighting every single day to find my next customer. I'd rather do something where there's less, it's a less crowded space. So if you can take away from that it's not anything to do with age, it's still about just the mindset and what you're actually trying to do. I think it's more important in the quality versus the quantity.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I definitely love that, and I never heard anybody say it this way. Is yet again is the reminder of what is the problem that you're solving, what is the added value if there's necessarily not a problem you're solving, what is the added value that you're bringing and nobody else is bringing, and is it scalable? And I really like those three different elements that you mentioned. So that's actually very powerful. Let's talk about Stadio. How did that come about? What is the overall underlining of the company, the concept that you're trying to do with that?
Yeah, look, and so in short, the high level sort of, I guess, wording around what we do is we're developing a Web3 enabled sports ecosystem. So what that means is that we're actually developing quite a few different individual products and services that can be used by people within that sports ecosystem, whether it's athletes, whether it's sports agents, whether it's media. We're developing a suite of tools that everyone can kind of use, but we want to have that underlying technology using blockchain because we believe in the decentralized nature of the next stage of the web. Now, how it came about, myself and Martin, when we both sort of sold our last businesses around the same time, I think it was like end of 2019. And obviously just before COVID. So it was a very interesting world, you know, in the 6 months after we sold our businesses and going into, you know, public listed businesses and the market's reacting. So it's been a very interesting journey. But when Martin and I sort of caught up, you know, he was actually involved with a number of individual athletes, you know, sponsoring them, investing in them. He's also sponsored some corporate like sporting teams, and you know, just talking to people in those circles. I come from the players side previously. You know, it's been a number of years since I've actually been, you know, an active athlete, but you know, I've still got some friends and whatnot from my years that are now playing professionally, and I stay in touch. And we just, you know, listening to some of the concerns and the issues they have. A good example is a professional athlete that you know, is represented by some people that Martin and myself know. They were telling us some of the issues around, you know, digital asset ownership, especially with this now new rise of, you know, NFTs and cryptocurrencies and digital assets and this kind of Web3, you know, world that's, you know, starting to be, you know, more and more mainstream. You know, what can we do to help enable athletes to monetize themselves in this kind of space without the leagues and the clubs also just taking full control and taking, you know, all the I guess the cream of the money to be made. So we actually want to look at how do we help the athletes. So you know, a couple of the stories and the feedback talking about validating, some of the feedback we got from these agents have said, athletes don't have a way to track their digital assets. Let's say they offer up a jersey that's signed for charity, and then years later they see that same jersey being auctioned off, in Sotheby's in England. They didn't sign that jersey and give it to a charity for that, that end goal. That wasn't what they had in mind. So how do they track that journey? And that's one kind of example of some, a very simple process that, blockchain technology could enable a transparent and tracking accountability to digital assets. And it's being used now in things like, the diamond trade, legal contracts, and obviously not being able to manipulate points of data, but also looking at how do we enable athletes to, digitize themselves and provide new ways and new fan engagement opportunities. So that's where, I guess, having this discussion, over a beer, in Sydney, in sort of, coming out of the end of summer, how could we get involved? And so we went back and spoke to a few of the contacts that we had in the space, and sort of validated the idea of creating this, this ecosystem, and developing some tools to help, athletes and agents, work in this space. Validated it with a few different investors, and ultimately we said, it was a goer. So we decided to, go get some funding and, embark on the next venture, which we're super excited about. And we've so far, we've been signing some really great talent, and we're starting to look at, other different product streams that we can get into.
That's awesome. You don't have to go into too much detail, just in case for some of the people that might be listening to this that may not understand the terminology. Can you explain what is a blockchain? What is NFTs? And obviously all of that has to do with digital currency or Bitcoin, just a little bit so that they can kind of get a better understanding.
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, and apologies again. I've actually just come off the back of a road trip over to Los Angeles, as you mentioned when we first started chatting. So I've been in.
By the way, we should have met up. I'm in LA too, so that would have been.
Yeah, no, I'd actually hoped to catch up. I think we just must have missed with our schedules. But in relation to that kind of trip, I was in the bubble, so I was at a specific blockchain and cryptocurrency event. So I think I'm just used to talking to everyone that knows the lingo. But so for those that don't know, breaking it down, if you think of a digital asset, and most people would know what Bitcoin is now, it's a digital currency. It's peer-to-peer, meaning that there's no sort of middle person. The technology that allows that type of distributed currency to work is blockchain. And blockchain technology, it's essential. And I'll break it down to even more simply, because people would say it's a distributed ledger, and if you think about blockchain, the word, it's literally the way in which the database works. So you have a block of data, and then it's stored sequentially. So you can actually scroll back in a blockchain all the way to the very first block, and you can see the first bit of data that was entered. And then you can obviously, work your way back. So blockchain is also it can be private or it can be public. But ultimately what it does do is it allows decentralized applications to run along it. And that's something that we're very focused on, which is, creating a decentralized architecture, meaning that no one individual owns the whole technology or owns the whole kind of process. It's an accountable, there's accountability, it's transparent, and it's decentralized in that very nature. So the word NFT, which I mentioned, means non-fungible token. So essentially there's the ability to store, information on a blockchain. And one of the more recent kind of, rising, parts of this blockchain Web3 ecosystem is non-fungible tokens, in that you can actually create what's called a smart contract, which is obviously stored information on a blockchain. But you can, instead of having just a typical, if you think of a PDF file on your computer and it's just got like a little image on it, you can actually create or assign a video file or an image or a voice recording to represent the smart contract. And so these things called NFTs have started to actually get a lot of hype, and some people are using them as some status flexing and changing their Twitter avatars to them. You might have heard of Bored Apes, or the Bored Ape Yacht Club, which is a brand now that Adidas or Nike are partnering with. Crypto punks, there's quite a few. You can once you start getting into the rabbit hole, it gets deeper and deeper, and there's some pretty crazy things out there. But what an NFT represents is obviously a smart contract, and we're using them in a way that athletes can create some sort of a visual representation of a real world benefit, which if you were to purchase an NFT that one of our athletes have created, it will unlock some real world benefit, whether it's a 30-minute video call, whether it's a in-person kicking session. By holding that asset, it's proof of ownership, meaning that you're the person that is entitled to that benefit, and you then have proof that you've attended that concert or attended that workout. That's what we're kind of looking to build out at the moment. Now, Web3 is also a new term for a lot of people, because some people don't even understand when did we get to Web3. So you obviously have the way that I like to sum it up is Web 1 was about sending and receiving information. So we're talking, old school, DOS systems, the very early days of the internet and the World Wide Web. Then we had Web 2, which is about connecting. And so you think of companies like Facebook, like Instagram, these social, giants that have now got sort of applications that you can use and connect with other people. Web 3 is about ownership. And I think that's where we're now in a transitional stage, and people will wake up one morning and say, oh, wow, when did this happen? But this has been building for quite some time. Web 3 is about decentralization, ownership, and governance over your own information. And I think there's a lot of people that are waking up to, oh, where is my information being stored, and who owns my, my data online? That's really the crux of Web3. And so we're operating in that space. And a lot of that is enabled by blockchain technology. So that's where we're kind of at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And definitely that's a really good summary of all of those different terms and things that are going on. So what is your vision with Stadio? Where you're looking to take that?
Yeah, look, where we start is not necessarily where we'll end up. And, like all good sort of, founders journeys, myself and Martin, we've tried to stay fluid, and we've already kind of within our own, roadmap, we've already kind of pivoted a few different angles and trying to tweak things to be obviously different and keep our competitive edge. But ultimately, we'd love to be seen as the number one marketplace for athlete utility-backed NFTs. Now, with that, there's other flow-on aspects around, decentralized finance, being able to sort of get into more, borrowing against assets, being able to have a marketplace for creators, so that if somebody wants to have a design done for their NFT, connect the designers with the people looking to have the artwork done. But also provide some analytics tools for the people that help, work with athletes, so that that sports agent, business to business type, software analytics, management system. And that's the other part that we're working on at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. If people want to connect with you guys, where can they find you, or how can they learn more about you guys?
Yeah, really simple. So not to confuse anyone, Stadio.Global is the URL. So it's not Stadio.com, it's Stadio.Global. And then that website gives you all the different links to our socials. You can then click on a few different of the product links. You can connect with us in Discord. We've got an online community of people that are actually involved in the project already. But yeah, myself and Martin, we're also on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out anytime, and we'd love to have a chat.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I just have a couple more questions for you, and you've given us a lot of great value, and you've dropped some really good bombs, right? And what I want to know is, for the people that are listening to us and are watching us, if they're going through any challenge, whatever that challenge might be, what is one thing that you can say to them that they can start doing to overcome that challenge?
Yeah, look, I think definitely put it down in physical form, right? Like write it down so you can visualize it. So one of the things that I have had always struggled with is getting the ideas out of my brain and putting it down somewhere, because it's all good to have ideas built up in your head, but if no one else can hear it or see it, it doesn't really help you. So try and write it down. There's some really great mind mapping tools out there. First thing I'd say is, pen to paper, just start jotting down some ideas, write it out, because you can go away and then come back to it, and you don't have to stress about, oh, what was that thing that I was thinking of? What was this idea? It actually helps reduce that kind of, stress or worry about trying to remember things. But yeah, that would be my first step.
Yeah, and I actually like that. I think if you look at some of the people in the past, even to include now, Richard Branson, he always carries his little notepad, right? So if you have an idea, you kind of note it down and things like that. Because again, you might be really busy in the middle of something and you have probably the one idea that you need to take it to the next level, and you got to write it down because you might forget. It's definitely, I think, a good practice to have. Do you have any particular habits that you do on a day-to-day basis to kind of just keep you in a positive state of mind, or to say, you know what, I'm waking up to today to really attack the day and win the day?
Look, there are a couple habits, probably not necessarily good ones, but one of the things that I do try to do is, and look, I'm not claiming this as my own. I've actually seen this implemented by quite a few different really successful business people, and that's your choice of wardrobe for the day. I've got the same shirt in a few different kind of colors and the same pants in a few different styles and cuts as well. But having to reduce the number of what I call less important decisions in the day. You make so many decisions in the day, you're spent by the afternoon. So if you can reduce the number of unimportant decisions, that's as simple as, I've got my uniform picked out for the next day, or, what am I going to eat for breakfast? Those little things, if you have the same kind of routine and pattern, it actually does allow more brain space for the rest of the day. So there are a couple of things, generally I stick to the same breakfast, and I'll try to wear the same thing daily. I'm not, going out there to formal parties every day of the week. So I'm pretty, and being, able to work from home a lot more, you can obviously get away with wearing the same thing. But obviously if you're, you are going out and socializing, just dress respectably, and you don't have to, overthink what you're doing necessarily. But that, for me, there are a couple habits that I can do each day that I feel help me, lighten the load, so to speak.
You know what? I never saw it that way. And you're actually absolutely right. Sometimes we do spend a lot of time thinking about what am I going to wear today? What shoes am I going to put on? Whatever that might be, right? And actually, I definitely, that's a great habit to embark on and take on. So that's amazing. In terms of just being able to see, where you're at now, did you ever felt like you were going to be in this place looking back in your past?
No, absolutely not. You obviously always have ideas and wishes and thoughts of where you might be. But no, I think everybody's journey is different. And if I could be, living on my own island like Richard Branson, that would be the dream. Right? I think a lot of us think the same way on that. But look, I'm very, very lucky that I'm in a position that even if things, don't work out necessarily, I've still got, some great friends, some great family, and obviously the right support and mentorship that allows me to pick myself up, get back on track, and keep pushing through. So I know, it's taken me a while to get to this point, but I know that no matter what happens tomorrow, the sun will come up the next day, and you just gotta, keep on trucking, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing, Ash. I gotta say, I really enjoyed this conversation with you. And so, before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to say to the audience?
No, absolutely. Look, I really appreciate you having me on. If anyone is interested to learn more about what we're doing at Stadio, please feel free to reach out. But yeah, watch this space.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you again, Ash, for being here today. I really appreciate you. And for the rest of you guys, do me a favor, please make sure you check out Ash at his website. I'll have all those details for you guys. Go ahead and connect. And do me a favor, share this message, because somebody needs to definitely hear this message. And I'll see you guys at the next episode of You Can Work On Anything podcast show. Bye.
Hi, I'm CesarRespino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you've tuned into this podcast. You can find me at your favorite podcast platform where you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. And to learn more about myself, my services, you can find me at www.CesarRespino.com, or you can also find me at your social media. Thanks for joining me, and I am looking forward to having you at the next episode. and know you truly can overcome anything.